On November 27th, 2024, the YouTuber Sieve Gaming uploaded a video titled, "Is it possible to beat Echoes of Wisdom using only the table echo?" After clicking on it, I found myself disappointed. Not because it was a bad video, I actually liked it and sympathized with his frustration with Nintendo's design philosophies, the lack of accessibility settings in their games, and especially the inability to downpatch easily. No, I was disappointed because I knew it was possible to beat Echoes of Wisdom using the table as my only echo, and I'll show you how. Oh, and if you end up liking this video, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks. After getting past the intro section with Link and mashing through some exposition, we are thrown in jail, where we meet Tri and obtain the Tri-Rod, an item that allows us to copy glowing objects and summon them as echoes. We need to copy the wooden table in our cell in order to escape, and I don't need to copy anything else to beat the game. The table is all I need, and I made effective use of it when avoiding the guards. As tempting as the copyable objects around me are, I do not need them. Not even the old bed that we love making staircases with. The 1x1 table is definitely less intuitive for making those staircases though, but by pushing a table half a tile forward, I can make a 3 table high staircase that can get me the same height as simply placing 3 beds. From a staircase, I also summoned a table echo to break the crates at the end of the escape section, skipping the need to use a boulder echo. After being washed away, I had my first encounter with a monster. As you could imagine, the table is pretty useless against monsters in most situations, so I do my best to avoid encounters. Using the table to jump over the urchins on the beach actually makes it easier for me to build the table staircase up to the cave, as the Zol will take significantly longer to spot me. I had to build the stairs quickly before the Zol could get an opportunity to break the tables. From here until I enter the rift, it's pretty smooth sailing. Up until this cave, where we have a forced enemy encounter with these Zols. As you can imagine, with a table, we can't do anything to hurt these enemies, so we're unable to progress. At least, we would be if it wasn't for this guy's wife. Yeah, that's right, this woman, who fell in the rift in an earlier cutscene, will allow us to progress via wife jump. By creating a table staircase, we can stand on her, and we have barely enough space to make a tiny staircase. We then enter the first dungeon, Southern Ruins, where we immediately gain the Bind ability, allowing us to bind grabbable objects and move them around. Using Bind in creative ways allowed me to progress through the dungeon very easily. It's almost like I didn't need anything but the table. Of course, this smooth sailing didn't last, as I entered the Echo Link fight. This was the first major obstacle of this challenge, and the lack of any monster echoes was going to make this pretty rough, but not impossible. Here's what I did to defeat Link. But before we get to that, a word from today's sponsor, ExpressVPN. Look, I can be a pretty private guy. I'm feeling a bit shy today, and I don't appreciate strangers or any ISPs snooping on me or my online activity like they're watching me go to the bathroom. I don't want any of that. Thankfully, ExpressVPN works like the perfect bathroom door lock. Sure, the chances of someone looking in is pretty low, but I don't want to take any unnecessary risks. By using ExpressVPN, it is much harder for big tech and bad actors to track and sell my personal data. Even better, ExpressVPN allows you to reroute your connection to another country to throw them off your trail, or you can be like me and use it to access region-locked Netflix shows and movies. I was able to access Adventure Time on Netflix from switching my location from the US to Italy. Doesn't having a bathroom lock sound great? Good! Now go to expressvpn.com/lunaticj or scan the QR code on screen to find out how you can get 3 months of ExpressVPN for free. Link is in the description and pinned comment below. Using Bind, I ripped away Link's shield to make him more vulnerable, but without any monsters, there wasn't much I could do to deal damage. There are some pots, but there aren't nearly enough to beat him. My only option was to drop tables from up high. The best strat to do this is to stack 2 pots on top of each other in front of the stone slab, hop on top of the slab, place a table, and drop them from above. This was an effective strategy, but not completely foolproof. I had to make sure not to leave any way for Link to hop up to knock me down, and I especially did not want him to break the pots. After a few failed attempts and a lot of circle camping, I managed to beat Link, and gained the ability to transform into the sword fighter form. Now, with the sword, I finally have the means to directly attack enemies. But hold on, this is a table-only run. Wouldn't using the sword be against the spirit of the challenge? Well, to that, I say no. I don't believe the sword takes away from the challenge for a few reasons. The sword fighter form is based around an energy bar that depletes, adding a layer of resource management. It's not an echo, and the challenge is about beating the game with the table as the only echo I can use. Not to mention, at the start of a new save file, you have to progress with Link, which includes the sword. If we allow using it before, it makes no sense to ban using it after. Using the newly acquired ability, the rest of Southern Ruins was pretty straightforward. Plus, at the end, we get a 4th heart and a 4th summon triangle. After some more cutscenes, this is where the challenge gets more interesting, as this is where Sieve abandoned the challenge. With just a table, you don't really have the means to progress to the next 2 intended dungeons, Gerudo Sanctum and Jabul Ruins. Even if you made it further into a late-game dungeon like Lanayru Temple, you cannot defeat that dungeon's boss without a fire and an ice echo. So with that in mind, it's impossible to progress further as intended. Emphasis on intended. If you've kept up with speedruns of this game since release, you're likely familiar with wrong warping, a powerful glitch that can be used to warp to dungeons much earlier than you're supposed to, including the final area of the game, Null's Body. Exclusive to versions 1.0.0 and 1.0.1, wrong warping relies on activating a glitch known as menu storage, a glitch state that allows you to not only move around the overworld with a menu open, but also the ability to open up 2 maps at once, an exploit that is key to making wrong warps work. Getting map storage is pretty simple. You go to these treetops near the Eternal Forest, place down a sign echo, read the sign right as you cross into the Void Out Zone, and then open up the map within a couple frames of closing the text box, and boom, you have map storage. Wait a minute, I don't have signs, I only have tables. So that's it then. I don't have the means to get menu storage. Or do I? As it turns out, there is another method, although it is much harder. Thanks to Ninpalk, it was discovered that you can get menu storage using the Sword Fighter transformation instead of a sign. By timing the transformation right as you're about to void out, you have a window to open up the map, allowing for menu storage. Nice! Wrong warping is back on the table. It isn't without its hiccups though. For one, activating the sword form always consumes a bit of the meter, and I really don't have many opportunities to refill easily, so I went out of my way to pick up ingredients out of some chests to make a few smoothies that will refill the energy bar. The second issue is more cumbersome. Since the table is the only echo I have, I cannot open the echo menu with L or D-pad right. This is a big deal with menu storage, as holding one of those buttons with the glitch active allows you to maintain the state when teleporting to a warp point and when re-entering the still world. The wrong warp works by entering the stilled world with menu storage, selecting a warp point in the dungeon, opening up the second map, selecting the graveyard warp point I activated earlier, quickly switching from the overworld to the stilled world map, and pressing A in the middle of that transition. Since I couldn't open up that quick menu, I needed to walk all the way back to Southern Ruins, and even then, I needed to do some convoluted menuing with the pins on the map as I was controlling Zelda. Even then, when I did everything seemingly correctly, I would enter the stilled world with the map gone. This happened a few times, and it was frustrating trying to figure out why the map wasn't there. Eventually, I figured out that by switching between the map and the quest log during the loading transition solved this issue, and I was able to enter Null's Body. Entering the final area with only 4 hearts is very scary, but a side effect of this wrong warp is that I am still able to use the sword, which you aren't supposed to have anymore at this point. With it, I made it through both enemy gauntlets and softlock skip without much issue. But then came this 2D section, where, with only a table, there was no way I could progress further. Luckily for me, a side effect of the wrong warp causes some cutscenes with Link to not play, meaning as soon as I got past the second enemy gauntlet, I could head back to where the path split and get to the end from Link's side. After making one last table staircase, it was time to face the final boss, Null. Phase 1 and 2 were a total cakewalk, but if you know anything about speedrunning this game, is that Phase 3 Null can be an absolute nightmare. The fight has several attacks that deal around 3 hearts of damage, many are hard to avoid, and worst of all, the enemy phases. During these sub-phases where you have to pull out arms from the walls, enemies like Darknuts and Lizalfos will spawn, which can be very difficult to avoid. You really want to pull out 2 arms before the enemy spawns become too overwhelming. Unlike many speedruns where you have access to monster echoes that can keep the enemies distracted, the tables aren't much help here. You really don't want to get hit. The Knoll fight was easily the hardest part of this challenge, and I do acknowledge that a lot of it is self-inflicted because I never went out of my way to collect extra hearts. It may have taken dozens of attempts across a couple hours, but eventually I emerged victorious and beat Zelda Echoes of Wisdom with only the table echo. Now, I do want to mention that I am far from the first person to have completed this challenge run. That honor goes to Ninpulk, who came up with several of the strats used, and completed the first table percent speedrun on October 9th. Special shoutouts to Sadrina and Naoto for completing table percent speedruns in under an hour. Links to those runs are in the description below, and shoutouts to Sieve Gaming for inspiring me to make this video. Thank you so much for watching, and remember to shoot for the moon.